Hello, I am here with Gonzalo Escribano, Senior Consultant for Government Relations of Speyside's Mexico office. Gonzalo, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you, Mario.
We're going to talk about the elections at the Estado de México, the most populous state in the country, which just held elections. How would you summarize the election and its results?
Well, first of all, I think it's a very important election. It's the very last big election in Mexico before the presidential elections next year in 2018. And Estado de México, as you said, is the biggest state in the country in terms of population, but as well the second most important state in terms of GDP as well. The results were actually quite tight. The margin of victory of the PRI, who managed to keep the governorship of Estado de México, was only about 3% against the runner-up, which was the left-wing party Morena, Movimiento de Regeneración Nacional, or National Regeneration Movement.
Yes.
This is a very interesting election because the PRI has actually controlled the governorship of Estado de México for over 88 years, and given the fact that this is a very big state in terms of both population and economy, that has always given them an advantage ahead of presidential elections. So that's I think the summary, but we also have many takeaways from this.
Which would you say are the main takeaways of the election?
Well, I think first of all we need to think about how it will affect Mexican politics ahead of 2018. Well, first of all, it wasn't a big victory for the PRI. So this was a state that the PRI will never lose, right? And actually, for the 3 months of the last 3 months, the PRI was actually quite scared about the possibility of losing this state. Yes. Particularly against the left-wing party Morena and their candidate Delfina Gomez. Second, I would say that this is also a very important election because it was kind of a referendum for President Peña Nieto. Let's not forget that President Peña Nieto was governor of State of Mexico, and he basically built his whole political career there. And having historic low popularity ratings. Yes. And an administration that has lost a lot of political capital, this was seen also as a referendum for him. So the fact that they were able to keep the state is avoiding basically a major crisis, but it doesn't mean much more for the PRI. I would say that what it allows the PRI is to be still considered a contender in next year's election. However, I would think as well that these will have repercussions in the other 3 important parties in Mexico, which are, as I said, the runner-up of this election, the National Regeneration Movement, which we must remember is led by Andrés Manuel Lopez Obrador, who has been the runner-up in the last 2 presidential elections and is accused by the opposition of being a populist and having nationalistic views on the economy and politics. Morena has almost been able to win this big election, and they basically, we cannot say they lost it because it's the first time they contend for it, but it's gonna make the life of Lopez Obrador a little bit harder ahead of the election. So before the election of the last Sunday, Lopez Obrador was seen as the inevitable winner of the presidential elections in 2018. By winning the Estado de México, he would have consolidated that idea. But now that he has, that the party hasn't managed to do so, he will have to actually invest much more in the campaign and try to find the right balance in terms of communications, both keeping his radical left base and as well attracting the independents, which tend to be more moderate. It also has an effect on the conservative party, the PAN, which, yes, let's remember, governed Mexico from 2000 to 2012, so just before Peña Nieto, and the PRD, which used to be the party on the left, from which Morena splintered in 2014, and which had been seen as a party that was going to fail rather soon. Why does it matter? Because the PAN actually managed to be at the top of the polls at the very beginning of the year. So people thought the PAN was actually a contender for this election in Estado de Mexico. And they selected a candidate who was actually the presidential candidate of the PAN in 2012. And they did very, very bad. They actually lost quite badly. They only had something around 11% of the vote, and they came fourth behind the PRD. These are bad news for the PAN leader in particular, who is Ricardo Anaya, who had been consolidating himself in the party, winning a lot of elections last year and the year before that, and now casting a shadow on those previous successes. And the PAN is a party that is experiencing a lot of internal division, and other potential presidential candidates such as Margarita Zavala, the former First Lady, are now saying that Anaya is not ready. And then on behalf of the PRD, well, basically sending a very strong message, coming third with an unknown candidate, sending a very strong message that they are actually not quite dead yet.
Yes. And lastly, but perhaps in a very relevant light, I would suggest, why is this important for the private sector?
Yeah, well, I think first of all, we just need to understand what is going to be happening from now on. So this is the kickstart of the presidential campaign. Once the Estado de Mexico election is over, basically we start unofficially the time of the presidential election, which is, I know, quite long, basically a year, and then if you add the time that it's going to take for the new president to actually take office, that's a year and a half. But it matters a lot because everything becomes very political from now on. What I mean is not that it wasn't before, but now issues of policy are always going to be, and decisions in terms of policy and legislation are always going to be attached to what's going to happen in next year in the presidential election. All the states in Republic and the federal government as well are going to be investing a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of money as well. Ahead of the election, so it's gonna be harder for the private sector to actually get a place in the table and decide things. And this is important during a time in which NAFTA, for example, is being renegotiated. This is going to be crucial because NAFTA now has the federal government now has 1 year to make sure that NAFTA gets renegotiated before something that is unexpected for them can happen, such as an election of Lopez Obrador, for example. So it's really important because of that. It's really important because we need to understand that it's gonna be harder now to actually make a change, and everything's gonna have to have a political angle, if you will, to make sure that things change. Also, the markets are reacting to this. So just to give you an idea, this was a very tough and very competitive election in which there are allegations of voter intimidation, vote buying, and misuse of public resources. And apparently most of these accusations are actually true. That's the way politics still works in Mexico. The fact that the PRI actually managed, which is the party that is being accused the most of doing this, managed to keep the election, sent a signal to the markets, and the markets actually reacted positively to this. Yes. Because the markets are quite afraid of what Morena can do and what the result of this election could mean for 2018. But I would say still, this was not a predictor of what's going to be happening in 2018. By no means the election in the Estado de Mexico has been a predictor in the past, but it's all about symbolism, and it just marks the very beginning of this period of time that I'd like to call the presidential election period, and we just need to keep monitoring this and keep looking at what's going to be happening inside the parties, who are going to be the candidates, what are going to be the platforms of these candidates, how are these platforms going to affect industry, and it's now time to actually approach them and not only monitor that and actually try to influence that. So very exciting times in Mexico, I think, and keep tuned because we're gonna probably be doing this much more often from now.
Well, thank you so much for your analysis, and certainly it will be an interesting time in Mexico politically and economically, but yes, we'll keep you updated.